Welcome back to Catch It, a New Perception. My name is Katuk, and we are beginning season 2 of the podcast. And it is the greatest podcast you'll ever hear. We have some new audio. I hope you appreciate it. I like the idea of being able to get away from what happened in the first season with audio and be able to do some better things moving forward. And I hope that this works well for everyone. I want to start off talking about perception. And often our perception changes. Often we have a different perception than someone else. So we have a picture rather than video on this podcast. And looking at that picture, what is it that you see? Do you see a sunset? Do you see a sunrise? Do you see neither? Is it possibly both? Is there more than one picture there? Or is it always the same? Does it change? It's your perception that dictates how you feel. Do you feel better believing that it's a sunrise? Do you feel better knowing that it's a sunset? Do you feel better knowing that it's both? That there's more than one picture there, that at times it changes. In having a different perception at different times, it will change how you feel about things. If you like the idea of a sunrise and how your day begins, and you're watching the sun come up with a beautiful sky, the colors you imagine that they are. Or do you like the idea of ending a wonderful day, watching a beautiful sunset? What makes you feel a certain way? Is there no emotion whatsoever? Does it not matter? Is there nothing there? You look at certain pictures or you think about certain things and don't feel a certain way? Sometimes it's hard to identify how we feel. If you're a guy like me who masked feelings for a long time, I couldn't identify my feelings. And I didn't know I couldn't identify my feelings. So I am starting to change my life. I'm taking some action towards it. I'm starting to think different. I'm definitely feeling different because my thinking's changed. I'm taking some big action to change my life. Doing some real different things. Happen to be hanging out with some different people. And all of a sudden, someone asked me about a phone call as the phone was ringing when they said, "Why don't you answer that?" I don't want to. Why not? You're afraid, Dan? No, I'm not afraid. And they said, "Well, why don't you answer it?" I said, "Because it's a bill collector and I don't have the money to reconcile the bill." And when they said, "You're afraid," I literally didn't recognize fear. I believed, I just didn't want to. Because I didn't feel all balled up inside. I didn't feel fear. My heart wasn't racing. I wasn't perspiring. Nothing was going on that made me believe that I was feeling fear. So my point in telling this story again is that I don't recognize how I feel sometimes. I'll look at someone or look at something or be in a certain situation and feel like I have no emotion because I have hidden from my feelings for so long. I cannot recognize how I feel. So when my perception changes and I have a chance to be able to see things differently, I will feel differently. I may even show up differently. You may see me walk with more confidence. Have you ever noticed that you look at someone and you're like, something about them's different? They walk with more confidence. Something in their eyes is different. They look different. They're better looking in some sense because their essence begins to change. So each one of us have the ability to be able to do this. Each one of us have the ability to be able to walk different, to carry a different essence. When we begin to see things different, we will feel different. And when our perception changes, we will feel different. So I use some of the terminology in different ways that means the same thing. If you see it different, your perception is different. So the perception is actually thinking differently. And the way that that happens often is to be able to see it differently. So as our perception continues to change, we will feel different. And the best way to be able to change that perception is to take different action. Does the video, the picture for this podcast look different because you're sitting at a different angle? Does it always look the same? Do you not even look at it or notice it? I was speaking with one friend about the background music I was using, and he said, there's no background music. And I said, that's beautiful. Because if you're not hearing it, then it's working well as ambient music. It's not that it didn't exist in some of these podcasts. So ambient music is meant to be just that. Background. Shouldn't stand out. It shouldn't be dominant. If you notice it, it's because you're conscious at that moment. If you didn't notice it, it's because you were more focused on something different. What is it that you're going to focus on? What is it you're going to see when you focus on something? How are you going to see things different when you focus different? You may have to take a different action to be able to see how you're going to think different. And you may say to someone that you care about very much, I don't want to. I don't want to do something different because you're comfortable with it. Because this is what you know. Or the fear of the unknown. The greatest fear that most people will carry is a fear of the unknown. We fear what we don't see or we can't imagine in our lives. And we don't recognize it as fear often. We just get comfortable with something and then we want to stay with it and say, no, I'm good. Even though not everything about it feels good, there's a comfortability within it. It's difficult to change when you close your mind. It's difficult sometimes to be open-minded to everything that's available to us. We have a hard time seeing that we have the ability to change if we open our minds. If we don't close our minds to all concepts. So if you're open-minded to something, you can be open-minded to something more. If you tell yourself you're not open-minded to something, you cannot change it. If it's something that you're comfortable with and you want to hold on to for insecurity reasons, you will probably continue to hold on to it. At some point, these things can change. You're going to have to be willing to open your mind, open your heart, and walk different. So opening your mind means that when someone says something, you don't take the opposite side and believe that you're always right. Do you want to be right, or do you want to be happy? Do you want to be right, or do you want to be spiritually fit? And if you want to be right, maybe it's time to agree with someone else because your point of view is not accurate. So if you can take the other side and agree with someone else when your point of view or what you're saying is not accurate, it's the best way to be right when someone else has a more correct point of view. So in doing so, if you've done that, if you've said, yeah, I see what you're saying, I know where you're coming from, and it was the opposite of what you were thinking, you've now just opened your mind. So you're not closed-minded to all things. And if you're open-minded to something, you can be open-minded to more. So the more that you listen to people, the more that you see people are right, the more you can be correct also. We don't want to assume things because assumptions are often not correct. We will co-create something that's not healthy. So in co-creating things, we want to be able to co-create things because we put them in action. And through the process of maybe helping others, we realize that we're helping ourselves. So we co-create a new reality for ourselves just by being able to help others. And everything that we do, we can co-create a new existence, a new way of thinking, and ultimately feel different. And if you feel the way that you want to feel 100% of the time, that's great. I know that this does not work overnight, that this takes time, that you're going to have to start telling yourself something different. If you walk into work and you say, I'm not happy today, and you tell yourself that, and you say, I don't want to be here. And then all of a sudden you verbalize that. Someone asks how you're doing. Yeah, I wish I was at home. I wish I was somewhere else. I wish I was doing something else. It's probably going to be a pretty tough shift at work. However many hours you're going to be there, you've telling yourself you'd rather be doing something else. Or you could tell yourself, I'm really happy to be employed. It's nice to be employed here. It's nice to have a job that I'm confident at. It's nice to have a job that I'm learning. It's nice to be able to be employable. Any of the above. The more you tell yourself about your job and how you enjoy it, the more you'll enjoy it. The more you want to get out of there as quick as you can and leave, the more difficult it will be to be there. To speak of your work with disdain does not make a good place to be in your head for 10 hours a day. If you have a half an hour drive to work and a half an hour drive home and 8 hours of work, you're looking at a good 10 hours a day. If you're sleeping for 6 to 8 hours, you have encompassed the majority of your week having disdain for what you do. What is your perception of where you work? Is it time to get a different job? Have you continued to jump from one job to the other because you think that working is beyond you? Do you realize that all work is honorable? All work is respectable? That we need everyone to be doing what they're doing for us to continue to function with the guidelines that we have. The things that we're able to do because other people are happily employed or disgruntled employees, whichever it may be, and they are employed. And that's the option you have. Do you want to be discontented with your work? Do you want to have a different perception? What is it you tell yourself? What is it you're going to tell yourself today as you're leaving work, as you're on your way to work? What is it that you say to other employees about your place of employment? Those are the things you're believing. The things that come out of your mouth you hear. What you hear goes into your subconscious, and now you have co-created everything when it comes to your job and what you think of it, what you think of your employer. You have co-created those things out of the things that you said. Rather than maybe when you were disciplined at work, you said, yeah, that was actually kind of cool because it'll get me to pay attention and this won't happen again, and therefore I can hold on to my job. Or, well, they're picking on me. Yeah, they're just focusing on me and they did this to me and they did. Chances are you did something that wasn't in agreement with policies or procedures at your work, and they reprimanded you to help you get better. And no matter how your supervisor comes across, they want you to get better, even though they may be a disgruntled employee and they may not have come across in the best way. Doesn't mean that you can't react differently. You can see it differently and say it differently. Then you have the option to be able to feel different about it. So what is your perception of your work? What is your perception of you? What is your perception of me? What's your misperception of work? What are your misperceptions of you? Or when I say me, what are your misperceptions of the people next to you? How honest are you being about the reality of everything in your life? Are you co-creating something that isn't even real? Do you have a great job and you take it for granted and think you're something special and you deserve something? Or are you grateful for what you have? Those are the two options we have. We can either be grateful for what we have, or we can take it for granted. How much do you take for granted in your life? How much are you grateful for? My perception is different than it's ever been, and my goal is that tomorrow my perception will be different than it is today. I had someone ask me one time, because when I began to change my life, I knew that if I wanted to feel different, I had to take some foreign substances out of my life so that I could do internal work instead of external work. And the external work that I was doing had to do with some drugs and alcohol in my life, and they are not present today in my life. Someone asked me one time, they said, "You don't drink, do you?" I said, "No." And he said, "Why don't you drink?" I said, "Because it dims my wit and it dehydrates my soul." That's what external things do. when I reach outside of myself to try to feel better. I need to go in to feel better. And I need to go into my heart, not into my head. I need to be able to begin to think different by telling myself something different, by changing my perception, by seeing it differently. What if the next time you listen to this podcast and you click on the video and there's a picture there and you tell yourself it's a sunrise? What happens to the time after that? And you click on it and the same picture happens to be there on the podcast and you say, it's a sunset. Will it change anything for you? Maybe, maybe not. You won't know until you take certain action whether things will change. When you tell something different to yourself about your place of employment, you will begin to think different. The person that we listen to more than anyone else is ourselves. We repeat mantras in our head all day long. We repeat things over and over and over again. What is it that you're repeating to yourself about your employer, about your supervisor at work, about the people who maybe you supervise at work? What are you telling yourself about your job as a whole and your employment? What are those mantras that you hear every day about your work? I'm not only grateful to be employed, I'm grateful to be employable. I'm grateful that I can make a living today. I'm grateful that I can provide for the people that I love as well as I do. Maybe not as well as I once did, and better than I once did, definitely. So I will continue to believe that I have a great employer, that I will do everything I can for my employer, for the department that I work for. Because if I walk into my place of employment and I think about what my place of employment needs is more important than what I need as an individual, I'm going to be better off. Or walk in and say, what my department needs is more important than what I need as an individual. And what my employer as a whole needs is more important than what the department that I work for needs. Always look at something bigger than me. I don't need to focus on myself and I don't need to worry about myself. I need to do what's good for the company that I work for. And along the way, throughout the years, although not always the case, I have been very well taken care of. Sometimes there seems to be some type of disdain coming from a supervisor. They don't appreciate the way that I come across or what I've done or the things that I do. And that's okay, because that's an individual. And I will continue to do what I need to do to be able to make where I work a better place to work for the people around me. Because then the people that come in and the guests that come into my place of employment are going to be better off because the employees are happy, the guests are happy. And then we create more guests, and that's better for everyone. That's better for the employees, that's better for the employer. So I do have a lot to learn about this, and I want to continue to change my perception. I don't want to think that I have anything figured out or I have any answers. I just seem to be able to do it a little better than I once did. And I can feel good about that, and I'm grateful for that. And so the next time that you look at a sunrise, realize that a sunset could look a lot like that. And if it's a picture of a sunrise or a sunset, realize that it could be either, or both, or neither.